Thanks for inviting me to talk, Michael. I'm James Culbertson. I'm a very old-time developer. I've been in it since, the late 70s. So that's why I said in my bio, from punching on cards with hanging chads all the way to, punching on Atom with Go. so I've got probably a perspective there from all the years. But I certainly like Go because it's a little bit of a throwback in a way to simpler programming, and without all the complexity and all the churn and change. It definitely gets you back there into some of the good old days, but with modern take on it. So it's been a lot of fun. And my day job, I usually program in Python or C#. So I did a lot of work in the oil field over the last 30 years, and for 10 years with Baker Hughes, and then the last 2 or 3 years for Halliburton, which has been more Python, interestingly enough. So on web apps for delivering data to customers from the well site. So basically, that's what I've been concentrating on. So I had a funny story. That's why I'm so paranoid about setting up all this audio visual. So I'd worked on this thing for Baker Hughes for about 10 years, and very complex application. It had a lot of real deep stuff to handle, super large files. It had a lot of notifications, and I had to handle all sorts of tons of use cases. So we got the consultants came in, of course, and says, oh, we can replace that in 2 months with SharePoint. so I was. I think it was Sogeti, not to offend anybody if there was Sogeti. But anyway, so they came in, and the guy that sponsored me, he said, okay, we better let you have a chance. And so they were going to give a presentation. So they were getting ready to, and they had all this great slideshow, but when it turned time to show something, they never could get any of the audio visual working. So I'm definitely paranoid about that, because I wouldn't want to, although I had a little bit of schadenfreude at that time that these guys couldn't get it going. And so my customer kicked them out. So that was, but that's something you'll hear often, especially in the oil field. Oh yeah, we can do that in SharePoint out of the box, no matter how complex the application is. Yeah, so what I want to talk to you about today is, and I'm new to Go, by the way, relatively. I've been looking at it kind of off and on for 6 months. Came to a couple of these meetings, which are good, and I didn't really understand some of the things till I really got into a application. The application that's complex and something that you would like to program in. That's what I find, if you don't really get in there and get into the super nitty-gritty and build up a real thing, you don't really understand how useful an environment might be. So far I've been pretty happy. Some things are tougher in Go, and some things are not. It just takes a little bit of getting familiar with the environment mainly, but I've been impressed by a lot of the things it offers you, especially out of the box, the development environment. So what I was going to talk about, why do testing, and I don't want to harp or anything on a particular religion around testing, but I wanted to just go over, you hear this a lot, what's in it for developers, really. It gives you some confidence if you refactor things. You can clean up and improve your existing code without as much concern. Certainly you can still have bugs, definitely not to say that, but it gives you a little bit more confidence to get, say, releases out quicker, if you're doing some kind of semi-agile thing, real agile or fake agile, whichever, depending on who you're working with. And you can add new features easily with fewer regressions, because you can, if your code is well tested, because that's typically the thing that may happen to you is something breaks that you never, and it's always the thing you'd never think of. Of course, if you thought of it, you would have caught it, but that's the way it always goes. So it helps there. I don't think it solves everything, but it certainly gives you an edge. But what I think, especially what I've seen in Golang, the development's enhanced quite a bit in testing. Because if you think things through, you can use decoupled designs. Go has an interesting interface capability, which I didn't really understand at first, and now I finally got it. And doing this intense testing thing really helped a lot to understand interfaces better. That's what really started to make it sing for me, what an interface is in Go. Of course, it encourages separation of concerns if you do it right. And what I like about it, it's built into the platform. It's pretty opinionated, like a lot of things in Go, like formatting is. And what I ended up doing a lot of times with my packages for the components I was building, I do the development as part of the test. I didn't even mess with main. I'd build a package and build a testing around it and start developing there and not even worry about running a main. That was pretty cool, I thought. And other benefits of testing, you get some documentation, uses of public methods. A lot of times when I see something on GitHub, I'll start digging into tests to see, how do you call these methods, what works, what doesn't work. And kind of in the same line, when you see a package, if you see a lot of tests, it gives you a little bit more confidence or acceptance that you want to use that particular package. But I wanted to stress not a silver bullet. Certainly, you can have all the tests in the world. You think you've got it perfectly covered, you're going to still hit bugs. But with a lot of thought, effort, design, and practice testing, you can certainly improve the predictability and the outcome of your code, I think, and especially with change. And that's the thing with code, it's always going to change, you hope, if somebody's using it. So also I was going to cover a little bit about code coverage. It's a good metric, but it's not the end goal in mind, because you can have 100% coverage and have useless tests. So I developed this application. I was wanting to better learn Go was one part of it. Second part was to fill a need. The wife was driving me crazy with her application. So I do a lot of my support on the side, seems like, because she's got a website with web applications called Elder Options of Texas that helps seniors find housing, and especially the children of seniors. And when you start getting to my age, you definitely know that problem. So I was going to fulfill a need of monitoring her websites, because she's got forums and applications, web applications, and I got kind of frustrated with some of the stuff out there, like Pingdom. They started charging more and more, offering less. You can only ping every 5 minutes or something. So this was kind of a need too. So it's always fun to work on something, that scratches an itch, so to speak, and it's not trivial. So what it's mainly do is monitor availability for websites. So it has these background Go routines that ping the websites, and also Go routines that do notify users of change in status. So it does email, SMS, and it includes a website, and I'm still working on that part, that does the status reports and settings. And this is pretty simple. SQLite 3 database stores the sites, the user, and the history. And we saw a pretty cool one here a few months ago, BoltDB, that I was going to look at as well, because that looked like a good application for the back-end database as well. It's like SQLite 3. One of the things I liked about SQLite 3, though, you can have some concurrent access in it. The downside is it has that sort of C interface that's not quite as fast, when you start seeing that in Go. That's sort of one of the kind of weak sides, I think. But this is a good application to explore testing, mainly because it had so many different aspects to it. And really what the components look like, this is the main application. It's got the primary ones are a pinger that goes out to the websites. And I think this is a good way to look at things, because packages kind of correlate, I think, in a way to some of your major functionality. That's not a bad way to think about them. So I built something called a pinger package, a database package to talk to the DB. And of course the pinger will store stuff to the database, and it will get information about the websites that are monitoring, who the contacts are. The pinger only the notifier only gets this information from the pinger, though. So it's kind of a good hub internally. And then there's a web aspect of it. So the web aspect is the part that does status reports, settings for people to log into and play with. And just to do a quick idea of what it looks like, it has this monitoring thing that runs, because the pinging is variable. That's what was nice about the Go routines. You just set off a pinger for a particular site and let it do its thing. And so it'll ping every, in this case, I've got it set up to go every 30 seconds. It's been real good about catching, a lot better than Pingdom was about catching problems with my wife's site, so she appreciates that. In fact, there was yesterday morning, there were several downtimes. And we'd never hear about them in Pingdom, and I think it's because of the coarseness of their pinging. Or they weren't maybe checking for all the things like slowness, because you can also set the timeout and things like that, because maybe you want to consider something down if it's taking more than 10 or 15 seconds to your users. It's essentially down. So this was all done in Go using fairly basic. I use Gorilla some for the. But I tried to stick as much as possible, like we were talking about earlier. Go provides quite a bit out of the box, so if you can try to stick with the standard library as much as possible, and then step out as you need to. I stepped out a little bit on the authentication. We were talking about that a little bit while ago. This was fairly simple, though. I just needed basic database cookie type things. So there's a package I did use called HTTP auth, which interfaces with several databases. It's good in that regard. But also was a good thing, and I'll show it in more detail how I was able to use Go's capability of interfaces to wrap around an existing library. That's what was really struck me as cool, is that even though this particular developer didn't put interfaces on his library, Go makes it pretty easy to make interfaces around his public methods and allow you to mock and test as you need to. That struck me as really nice. So it has a settings part, and this is the part that's still under construction. Users can, so that I found I get bogged down on a little bit, just because I'm not used to it like ASP.NET MVC or something where but I'm making progress on it. That's kind of the last thing I did anyway. So that's what the application looks like, So as far as testing mechanics, really testing is pretty simple as far as setting it up, and I'm sure y'all are fairly familiar with it already. You have a test package that has underbar tests, for example, and inside of it you have a convention-oriented thing where you say test whatever name you want to give that particular test, and use the testing packages within Go. In fact, I tried to stick. Oh yeah.
We have a little bit of trouble with the screen seeing the dark color. At least I know,
like
myself, with terrible vision. Is there any chance we can get a white background on this?
Oh shoot!
See if that's improved. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that actually. I'm sorry. Yeah.
He started turning on and off lights. I thought we were going to light.
Can I bring up at least the size of it?
Yeah, helps a little bit. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I apologize. I don't really know on this Adam. I should, because I always tend to go with these dark screens. I don't know how to go away from it, but that's a good point. It's probably better to present with white backgrounds. But anyway, the testing is a standard package, and so you can import that, and then using conventions, capital test, and then whatever your thing under test, and then you. In your arguments, you pull in a pointer to the testing.t package. So then that gives you a lot of capability to do things like, actually, if you have something that's pretty fatal to your test, I was probably calling fatal too much in this particular one because I was pretty new to it. But usually you just want to call t.error or errorf. But if it's something that's going to stop your test, you probably want to call t.fatal. But as far as running them, and this environment's pretty nice. If you want to run in this Atom environment, if you want to say run all your tests, it's just that /..., and that will take all the packages that you have tests defined for, and I have several packages defined here, and it's going to run through all. Go test. Sorry. /.... Yeah, it doesn't read your mind that well. It's getting close to it. So that's one way to test everything. Usually when you're development, you might want to supply the package name, which is certainly. But this testing in Go runs pretty fast. The only thing that's relatively slower to test I do, you can see the database one takes about 12 seconds because I'm doing some concrete database test. And you can also define tests that you might leave out under certain conditions. The pinger it takes a little longer too because it's actually running through, running several Go routines and collecting information about them, and I'll show how I do that. So that's how to test everything. It's probably more useful though when especially during development, if you're saying I just want to test for example, the package that I'm working on, maybe the pinger is a good example. Whoops, like /pinger. So that's the way that would work to do a package. And that will test that whole package for you. And the -v is verbose. So if you have logs or print statements within it, it will actually show you those particular things. So it passed all right, and yeah, so that's cool. If you want to test a specific method, there's this -run modifier that actually you can pass the name or partial name. That's actually a regular expression. That's something I learned during preparing for this talk because I always thought it had to be the full name of the package. For example, if you have a lot of like you wanted to get that empty site, you don't want to test that all. Pinger, and then you would say -run, and just type in that part of it, the empty, for example. That's going to get everything with an empty name in your test. So that's quite helpful. And you can apply all sorts of the regular expression stuff, probably all of which escapes me now. The old joke of now you have two problems. So that's actually pretty useful, and that's what I just showed there. So I just want to talk more about strategies and testing challenges. So this pinger and notifier are Go routine components, and I tend to try to write it, at least unless there's something that's pretty complicated as a private method. I tend to write the sort of white box public method test first, because I think for one thing they're a little bit more robust, and if you're going to do any testing, or if you're limited for doing some testing, that's what I'd say. At least I have these tests on my public methods that test behavior, and then if I go in and refactor something, you can. But if I have something that needs testing as far as a unit test on an internal private method, I can do that too. But one of the interesting things you can do that I learned about it, you can to enforce the fact that you're testing public methods and you're not picking up any cruft from the main package, anything that's private or global. You can say this package, give it a slightly different name, like pinger underbar test, because my main package is called pinger. But if you give it a different package name in the test, it'll still work within the bounds of that particular package because it's in the same directory. But then it considers it an external package. So that's kind of cool, because then you're only going to call public methods, and you're not going to. And if you do need to test the internals, which I do have some unit test sort of things in there, then you can give it the same package name. You'd want to put it, obviously, you have to put it in a separate file, but then give it the same package name. Then you have access to the private methods, which in Go, as you know, are lowercase versus uppercase. So that's kind of a cool thing I discovered when I was testing. I can't take credit with that. I read that off some website, which I do have in the show notes at the end. But also I think if you're going to do this sort of white box or sort of component testing, whatever you want to call it, versus unit testing, it's probably a little bit challenging with the Go routine. How am I going to instrument that really? Because you're kind of getting at the external interfaces a bit there. So one thing I ended up doing in this particular case is that I would log key events to a log file, and the log file will write when it's being run in the test environment to your internal package into that particular directory. So that's pretty cool. It's not just polluting everything else. It keeps it a little bit separated. So you can log these key events to using just the standard Go logging, and then after you're wanting to validate your test results, you can import that log file and ensure that it contains expected results. So that turned out to be useful. I don't know if that's not together best practice altogether best practice, but it was certainly one way to do it. Let me see if I can find an example. I've got no, that's not it, the new pinger. Okay, so I've got a start method so I can start up all the Go routines internally based on how many sites are active. And then I have also a end method, stop method. So if you're from the application, if you need to wind them down, it'll talk to a message and say, I want to stop these Go routines. But what I wanted to do in this particular case, I wanted to start the pinger up and make sure that it was doing what I was able to do. Whoops, I'm not in the pinger test. Excuse me. I was in the main method. But let me see if I can find test new ping. Here it is. Start empty sites pinger. So this is one where this is an example where I said, okay, none of the sites are actually active in the database. So make sure it behaves well. It doesn't crap out in that particular. So in this one, I get the log content and I look for a particular string, which it looks kind of nasty, but it actually is effective, especially on some more complex tests. So here I injected some errors, which I'll get to next. I just wanted to throw that out there as a potential way to do this particular thing. Yeah.
Are you accepting questions now or at the end?
Oh no, anytime,
okay.
fine. Yeah.
So I noticed in your test you have P star, so you're starting the pinger.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, that's starting a Go routine. Yes.
Yeah. Internally it is. Yeah.
I then noticed. Not this particular test. One of them then immediately went to go get log content. Now, what happens if your Go routine is running a little slow?
Yeah.
And you go to get log content, there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm. Well, in this case, I do wind it down, but this is nasty here. I acknowledge that. Yeah, it would be better to send a message to something. Yeah, to it. Yeah, channel. Yeah, exactly.
Or a view tech.
Right. Because that's exactly what this start and stop does anyway. It sends a channel to the Go routines to start and then to stop. When it's time to stop, it'll cycle through them and yeah. But this is a code smell, of course. So yeah, I'm with you there. I do need to.
So maybe your start.
Yeah, the stop will.
The channel, for example.
Yeah.
The channel that I'm operating on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right. Internal.
Consider the log idea. That's a neat idea.
Yeah, and internally I know that's probably a little more than it'll take, which isn't as efficient. So yeah, that's one thing I was thinking of doing is put some instrumentation in there to see when those particular things have stopped. Yeah, like you're saying. Yeah, that would be a big improvement because that is when you see these in there, that's a code smell for sure. but yeah. But thanks for pointing that out because I do mean to get back to that. In fact, now that we're in here, let me to do yeah.
Knew that was coming.
Yeah. It's hey, we're doing doing mob programming here. Might as well do that. So yeah, it highlighted it's the change already. Okay.
The log idea is a good idea. That's cool.
Yeah, thank you. So and then it just contains the expected results. And some things still might need to be mocked. I noticed, for example, we're not in this particular test. We're not really trying to test the notifier, but the notifier has things to do. So I did mock it. And when I first did it, I was doing more of probably not the most elegant way to mock it. I'll get into that. But this is just talking about some of the things, and then I'll shoot you guys a link to the slides later. But it shows how to do it. So mocking is the next thing I was wanting to talk about. Is usually you want to test as things as directly as you can, but mocking is a good tool. It's a necessary evil depending on what you're trying to do, because you might want to isolate. You want to make sure your tests are efficient. So if you've got some third-party package or a slow component like the database, you might want to mock that out. Go's pretty good at this. All the mocking I did with Go, I did just using the standard libraries. You might want to also set up error conditions. That's one thing for mocking too that's often overlooked, because you want to vary the conditions, and sometimes it's really hard to test some of your error handling. And I noticed when I started doing coverage testing, that was one of the areas where you really see big gaps, is often in the error handling. So there's several ways to do it, and I'll talk about the major ones. One solution is kind of like poor man dependency injection. I think it's been called sometimes, which is to pass functions as values. That's a nice thing in Go. A function can be made into a value like anything else. So you can put it in a struct or in the method arguments to one of your methods. So it's easy to do in Go without a mocking library. So one of the way I did it, I defined a function, and then I'll get to interfaces. So don't bang on me yet. Yeah. So this was an example where I just defined a type for a function, that has this particular method signature, and so it's a little bit like I say, kind of a different way to do it. And when I called the notifier, I would pass these particular to arguments. That's one thing that's often called poor man dependency injection.
So the whole HTTP package relies on this very same strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It's very well structured.
Yeah. And I found it quite useful actually, and I'll get into the other way of doing it. So then you define the mock. One thing I liked about it is that you could easily explicitly define a lot of different mocks that do different things, and inject them in different tests. So it's not definitely not without merit. Is a way to do it. And then in your test functions, you would inject that mock in there, either here, or you could also make it as part of your struct that defines your object. That's another way to do it. I don't know why I did it this way. That's probably what I was used to from C#, maybe. So sometimes you bring over these old habits. But then in the production use, of course, you have an actual full method that you're going to use that does the sending of the email and everything. And so let me just show a couple of examples of where I did that. So here's where some of the pinger mocks were. And then I even mocked in one particular case requesting the URL, which is the part that the Go routine does. And you can, when you have it as a full function like this, you can, define different ways to for example, here I said if it's hit a number of times, that like the second or third time, it will throw this error that your site's gone. So it gives you a way to get to these error conditions in these subtle third party. You're not going to be able to. Well, you might be able to, but you probably get arrested. If you're in China, you might do this. Take down GitHub and make that part of your test. I know that's been attempted a few times, although I don't think they were doing it for testing. So anyway, in the main method, actually when I create the pinger, I actually then use the more concrete method that actually does the good stuff. So I actually construct the production use one there. So that's certainly one way to do it. and it's a valid way. I really like how Go allows that indirection, but there's also using of interfaces is a quite nice way to do it. And where this really shows its shine is when you're having to mock or test around a third-party library that doesn't provide interfaces itself. And I got into a sticky situation with this authorization routine, because what I had put inside my controller was that I would call into this current user, and pass that back to the view. And what I wanted to do was be able to test that, but that's buried so far down. If you're going to do these kind of unit tests, to test your these sort of methods inside way down in your handlers, that's where it can get pretty sticky. So the using these kind of interfaces around the third-party library is a good way to do that, and that's really powerful in Go. Is that you can, because I've always thought of it the other way around. If you come from a C# background or Java, you declare this interface that's all encompassing, and then you have to implement it, and you have to implement all of them. But Go is very flexible. You can declare just one of them. In fact, that's really considered best practice to make small in scope interfaces. So the key to help doing this was to provide interface for these methods. Then I could implement them both mock and concrete methods. And the nice thing about the way it works in Go, really didn't have to change anything for it to work in the concrete sense. It worked right out of the box. Really cool. So I have a dependency on the methods that are coupled to this website, web state rather. And I wanted this get current user. See, that's down there in the controller in my handler function. So it was hard to really get to that in a test. And plus that's up in the third-party library. The get current user, even though it's one of my private methods, or private functions, it calls into this authorizer, which is this third-party library. So that's all, coupled into state, and it's coupled into cookies and things that you can't really test easily in a unit type of test.
And the authorizer is an interface is the one that you put together?
That's what, the HTTP authorizer, that's how it came out of the box. So this is how it was. So what I did was declare a current user getter interface, and I replaced or provided the methods that are called current user and messages. Well, there's also a message one, which is really just stuff that's saved to the cookie, for the flash messages, that sort of thing. So the current user, I used the same signature as in this third party. In fact, even had to use his structure, HTTP auth user data, but there wasn't any problem with that because that was generally available to my methods. So then when I defined this interface, then the only change I had to make it keep working in the general sense was change that authorizer to pick up my current, and that just worked out of the box. Yeah, that's what's really neat about these Go interfaces. So it still works exactly the same. If I fired up the main, nothing changed. But what it bought me was that then I could start defining my mocks. And then in your receiver structure, that's what's another powerful thing about this. You can actually make your receiver structure that the methods are going to attach to. You can define it a bit differently. See, here I define these properties to it, like flash messages, which are an array of strings, username, which is a string, and user error. This didn't have anything to do with this third-party package. But what it allows you to do when you call and create your receiver object down in your test code, you can pass different cases here, flash messages, different error conditions, or an error from the user error from the database. So you pass those into your, then you got to define the mock methods too, with that same signature that the third-party library uses. So that's what this is. But you can see what I did inside the body of it. I actually access the properties that come in from the struct that's holding these methods. So that's what's pretty cool, I think, is that it gives you this. So when you're actually in your test, you say, okay, here's my mock user getter, which is the object that's going to contain those mocked methods. And so I give a particular username, flash messages, that's to simulate things that are going to go on down in the guts. And so then I do the normal stuff, populate the templates, start this request. This is actually, I'm jumping a little bit ahead. This is how you can test using this this recording capability in Go, which is pretty cool for testing your handlers. It gives you this recording capability to record the response. So basically, I call my internal method down here, and right here at the bottom. Sorry, after I set up the response writer to be this recorder, and what that does, that gives you the full response to the web, the headers, everything that comes, and then you can use those in your assertions about the test. So just to show you a little bit more about what that does, let me get into the code a little bit because it's hard to follow in those. So this was my first foray into testing the HTTP part. So I've got these controller pieces there, I call it, and then this about. I started with that because it's pretty simple. It's just pulling down some stuff, but it also knows about the login. And so if you look at it in this test, I've already shown you this part. So you have this struct set up that has some of the properties you want to pass to your test methods, which we're mocking that library. So down in here, when you actually call your code, it's actually going to be able to pass those properties down into that third-party library. And that's pretty cool. And you get back a body with this recorder methodology. So this is a way to test your own handlers, really. That's the main deal here. This new recorder is just straight Go. And then down here you can start making some assertions, and this is just simple Go too. Since the body is actually a byte array, you have to convert it to a string. And then down here I just make some assertions on it. So you're really getting back what you would see on the web page, which is really cool. I guess since Go was oriented, to be within Google, they put a lot of nice testing harnesses inside here. So that's one of the testing harnesses. And let me go back to this. But I really like it. And I finally started understanding and grokking these interfaces after a while. And Go, it took a while to clear the head of what I'd had in it from before. Not that the Java and C# are bad, they're just different. It's a different way of looking at it. So in the HTTP testing, I already showed you this response recorder. So the response recorder gives you a way to test, your own handler or even another website possibly. That's not necessarily what you want to do with it. There's also in the HTTP test package a server capability. And what that allows you to do is create sort of a fake server coming in for testing. For example, I've got the pinger. I might want to test some of these difficult, especially for unit testing, where I'm not testing actually a response from any website, but you're wanting to test, okay, what happens, because I had a problem that I became aware of once when I was on startup. If I rebooted the server, I'm using DigitalOcean to host that site I showed you, and occasionally I would reboot the server, and as you're booting up, the network is in a crazy state for a while. So Go would start up with, and I just used the standard old Linux stuff to start it up, but it would start up sometimes before the network, And as try as I might, I couldn't get it to start up when it was fully. And so I had to put something anyway needed in there to be able to tell when the network was really up. So I had to put in a routine in there for testing. Is it us or them? Is the site really down, or one of those type of things. So I put in some. I had a hard time figuring out how to do that. That's not. It sounds simple in concept, Is it us or them?
Being a reliable site.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I ended up doing. You got the hat trick there. I'm trying to find, where did I have that? But let me go to the test. That's like I was trying to preach to earlier. That's one of the interesting things about testing, is you can start seeing some documentation about some of your methods, both internal and public methods. So I had this thing called "Is Internet Accessible?" That's the name of it. So I built this test, but if we look at the guts of this, is Internet accessible? Let me go back to and find it in the main code. Oh, that's one of the calls to it. So yeah, it does exactly what you're saying. In fact, it does it for 2 sites, and I've got it currently configured to first look at example.com, because I figured they'd be the least likely to get pissed off, and second, Google, because they might get a little. Of course, hopefully you're not bombarding them with these, but this is only an exceptional case.
5 seconds.
Yeah, I put the pretty short duration. Yeah, exactly, because I figured those sites should come back pretty fast. So it tries to get whatever you have configured first, and then sort of the second it tries one more time just in case that site's down. The internet's dead, and it's a night of the Walking Dead. So
You should keep NSA.
yeah, that's a good one. Really, let's DDoS them. So is internet accessible? I put a sequence of testing. So because that's what I learned when I started doing some of this coverage testing, coverage, which Go has some really nice tools for that I was missing. I was catching the first one bad sometimes, but never getting to that second one. No, the first was always good. Sorry, which is the expected case. So I did some. Inside this test, I made the first site bad, and so I did some tests around that. And the way I'm doing that is that using that capability I was telling you about the server HTTP test, where you can start up a server and give it different statuses and things. So you can sort of start up a fake web server, more or less. And then that s1.url gives the URL. It actually creates some internal URL. So it's quite nice for testing some of these sort of things. You can do a lot more than I'm doing with it there, but that's all I really needed for this one. In fact, the way I tested it, I didn't even start it up, because you can start it with an unstarted state. And then there's the proper state new server returning status OK. So I was able to test my internal method that way. So that's one thing Go does out of the box, gives you pretty good tools internally for testing things like this in that HTTP test package. And if you look at some of the internal Go standard packages, particularly the server one, you'll see some really interesting things they do about testing not only the actual server response, but even the dialer, how the dialer does, and the links. That was way beyond what I needed, but you can certainly learn about it. Learn about how to use those tools from looking at the Go code. So finally, I wanted to talk about testing databases, because that's often a pretty controversial topic, because you don't necessarily just want to mock them all the time, because I've seen so many problems that happen in the real world because somebody's mocked the database or tested with another database, and then you get to the real world and you run into something. So, but it's usually you want to mock it if you're testing something else. But you also may want to have some integration and component tests that use the real DB. So I do a little bit of both with the other components. But one thing about database testing to really think of is each test should stand on its own, and which is a general rule for testing anyway. You want to be able to test each test in isolation. In other words, it initializes things. If you wanted to just test that one test, it should work without having other requirements. And so one of the solutions I did, I'm not saying it's the best, but I built it, and it's pretty fast since you're running these local databases like SQLite. I built an initialize method that also just builds it from ground up, the schema. So in each test, it clears the DB and runs it. In fact, I do it in the beginning. Some people do it the opposite way. They'll run the test and clean up. But what I found is kind of useful is if you clear it at the beginning of your database test from the last run, if somebody left one in the database package area, the fact that you leave it after a test, so if you're using that trick I showed you just to run one test, then you can go in and examine inside the database and see what actually happened. So that's why I tend to like to do it that way. And so you and I like to do it, especially this one. You want to do it as a user of the package. So if your package is database, you would say database underbar test package. So my test pattern was usually insert, update, and read, verify, and also be sure to do constraint violations. Try to think of all the things that might happen, how people violate constraints if you have constraints in the database. And so the way I do this initialize DB, and like I say, I do it at the beginning. I just check, if I have an initialize DB method anyway. So if somebody's running main to begin with for the first time running the application, if it looks for a seed file being passed, which is just a TOML file that helps build an initial database. But I also have this create schema. So every time the database is initialized, if there's not one existing, it goes through all the schema creation code. And I'm sure I'm not too distant future, I'm gonna have to add some update code too in there. But I think that's cool to be able to build on that, create your initial schema. It wasn't very complicated to set that up. And then I have further initialized test DB, which calls the main one that would be run from the main. And then it will also delete the DB if there's an existing one that's still there. So that's kind of how I test DBs. That worked out fine. One thing I learned about Go is when I started doing some of the assertions, because there's this kind of nice deep equal thing in reflection. So I was building up, the contacts for the site, and then I would try to get the site contacts doing these tests, etc. And then ultimately I look at my initial struct that I created versus the site contacts that come back from the DB. So I'm just kind of like garbage in, garbage out, or hopefully good stuff in, good stuff out. But I saw some really weird behavior with dates. I don't know what it was, but this did not like 0 dates. But I did a lot of Googling, and I probably should have filed a bug, but it may be intentional behavior, because 0 dates are kind of squirrely. It's 110 or whatever. But deep equal works fine for doing these kind of assertions normally. But I just put that in there to see. I ran into it. It drove me crazy for a few hours till I figured it wasn't me. It was something else. So test coverage is a nice tool. You can do graphical test coverage using the cover. One thing good that they put in the Go packages is that they put in there that it instruments automatically the code. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but when you're doing something like this, it's putting instrumentation in not in your main code, but in your test code. So it's able to be able to reason, and especially if you use this intensity of coverage, there's a heat map, which is kind of cool. And if you make this heat map in your HTML file, you can hover over the various parts of your code. See, that deep green has been tested 15 times, and here I'm barely hitting this routine 2 times, and this kind of green-gray. I only hit once, so it gives you sort of a quantitative feel, not just for coverage, but how often are you really hitting these things. And of course, there's one where, like I was talking about before, and that's how I discovered this is internet accessible. I wasn't hitting that at all, so that turned out to be very useful. So anyway, and kind of in conclusion, I'll use Go's native test environment because it's really good, and take advantage of it and try to write tests during development. I'm not religious about TDD, although some people like it. I mean, I've used it before. I think developing algorithms and things, complex algorithms, it's pretty good. Just run-of-the-mill testing, I just try to develop with tests. That's what I did on this Go. I would write a little bit of code and then run the package test and see, using that -run modifier, is it running as I expect? It's kind of TDD, but not the hardcore red light first, all that. So anyway, and I generally functional test. If you're not going to do much testing, at least try to do that, because they're often better anyway for refactoring, because you don't have to worry about test breaking so often. Hopefully your external public methods don't change as much, and you can use that trick like I showed with the different package names to enforce public only usage, and test private functions when required, and that would go in a different test file with the same package name, so you have access to those. I'm not saying never do a unit test your functions. I'm just saying that as a matter of priority and behavior testing is usually what you want to ultimately do at the beginning. And when a defect is found, this is just general stuff, write a test to cover it. I did try to do that here too, because I would occasionally find a defect, shit, I didn't test that. And that's always a good time to go in and write the test and cover that, so you don't hit it again. That's all. The last thing you want is Walking Dead bugs. And test your own code behavior in general, not vendor packages, but sometimes vendor packages might need some more tests. So I'm not saying don't ever do that, but sometimes people tend to write tests around the framework, and those are waste of time generally, especially a framework like Go or language like Go that's pretty well tested. Don't test their stuff. And interfaces are your friend. They, besides being just good practice for writing decoupled code, they allow you to mock these third-party methods and keep things loosely coupled. That was a really nice surprise I had out of doing Go, was that capability to test third-party packages that weren't even really well set up for testing. And then also use the graphical tools, coverage tools, and I got some links in here, which I'll send this out. To write it down, and I'll also send you the link to this particular site that I've discussed that's under development. It's not quite ready for prime time because I haven't done the docs yet. That's probably another practice we should do. DDD. Yeah, doc. What's that?
Do you have a code on GitHub or?
Yeah. Sorry, that's let me see if I can make that bigger. Yeah, but I'll send out the link to this PDF so you can have it. Yeah. So that's that particular site. It's like I say, it's still heavily under development, but certainly feel free to look at it. And
This is great. That's very cool.
yeah. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
I just wanted to go over a few things really quickly. So first of all, improving where we're at right now. They pay for the pizza. They give us They give us this area to host, and so I just always want to just say thank you to improving. Like today, they hosted. I want to say it was some sort of like agile training course here. And they had some of these boards set up and cards set up. It looked like they were doing planning poker and other things, but
and pizza was excellent and beer was even better.
So, but I always want to give a thanks to them because I first ran across several of the guys at some conferences, and they're always doing cool stuff like hosting a whole lot of different meetups for Houston. And I think they said something like in Dallas they host like 70-something meetups in Dallas. so now they're starting to help the Houston community too. So just big thanks to the sponsor. You want to start coming up? One other thing I just wanted to mention to people. I don't know if anybody's heard of GoBridge. Okay, so apparently it started off by somebody who had started up like a Ruby Bridge initiative, and what it was is a person in Silicon Valley who's like, I think we need more diversity in programming. I'm going to take it upon myself. And so they started up this foundation. Now Bridge is the whole foundation, and the reason I mention this is a lot of people I noticed in the Go community have been partnering with it, and I know they've reached out to me wondering if the GoLang Houston group would be interested in partnering with them. And so overall, it's a pretty small commitment. They have a code of conduct, which I read over it. Pretty much it's like no sexual harassment, no offensive, if you hold events, don't be exclusive. And all the stuff I read, I said, well, hopefully we're that way already. The other thing that they asked for would, which if we did it, I was going to do the work for, they wanted to help set up a conference in Houston. They'll bring in the speakers, it sounds like, unless we want to help with speaking. They'll help, they have all the training material available. And even like some of the people, I saw it like Bill Kennedy, Go in Action. I don't know if any of y'all read that. Great book. If y'all haven't read it, I really enjoyed it. I think like he's one who goes to some of them. But what they ask for you is to help organize some of this event where you encourage underrepresented groups to attend the training. And it's like a 1 or 2 day training. And so I've been kind of going back and forth with them to see what exactly that entails. But I'm interested. I told them I'd put forward my time. I wanted to get people's input, whether people thought it was a good idea or if anybody had any concerns. Overall, I don't think it'll affect our group other than saying, yes, we support this. So, and if anyone's interested also in helping out organize it, just get in touch with me, let me know. And one last thing I'll say is, that was an awesome talk, James. And James is somebody who, 3 months ago started GoLang, started this awesome project on it, and this internal growth has been great. So we have one of the talks scheduled for February. So afterwards, maybe anybody who's interested can stick along and start seeing how we can plan out the rest of February, March, April. So thanks again.
Actually, today I'm going to be talking about text console user interfaces. So one of the things I sort of explored a little bit around when I was actually kind of playing around with Go was actually that there were some actually cross-platform text user interface libraries you can use. So one of the things I kind of did as sort of playing around with it is a little proof of concept here, so you can kind of see it as I'm kind of talking along. So actually, I will probably skip that along. My interests and stuff, I give kind of a little self-introduction and some of my interests in Go. So what actually I'm going to talk about today is something called the Term UI library. And it's actually a console library UI. And some of the things that it includes is a bunch of widgets and stuff for actually kind of helping to build dashboards that all basically render completely just in a text UI. Or actually, I'm sorry, in the console. A little bit more information. Actually, the text UI library itself is built on another library itself called termbox-go. And some of the things that it gets from there are actually some handlers, events, and a lot of the cross-platform capabilities that the Term UI has. So Term UI actually has like a whole bunch of like little tools and widgets and stuff that you can use on top of this cross-platform library. So as I kind of mentioned beforehand, there's some widgets available. The other thing that actually that the Term UI also offers is an automatic grid layout sort of feature. So as you kind of put these widgets in, you can actually kind of say, I want to have this sort of put into a grid. Just shove it in there and kind of deal with it for me. So some of the widget features that you can see is that any of the widgets actually can be surrounded by borders. The widgets themselves can actually have labels associated with it. The borders actually can also have labels associated with it as well. All right. And well, I'm just going to kind of go through a quick kind of step through some of the stuff that you actually have available as for some of the tools there. So one of the ones is that the term UI actually calls par, or actually as I call it, just text box. It's just basically a text box. So, you know, text box widget, hello world. Another kind of widget they have available is actually some lists. So it's a bunch of text and lists and stuff like that. It's just basically kind of a list of strings. You can also have some colors and stuff associated with it as well. All right, and another thing that you can actually have as well is you can have some line charts. And it can kind of render and draw it over there. And mhm.
Is that just data that you put in?
Yeah, that's data that I just sort of put in there, but that's something that you could actually kind of feed in through something else. So if you have some sort of data feed that you're trying to put in there, you could actually kind of, oh, great. My apologies, I probably took too long. That's me here. So let's go back to over here. Yeah, so, yeah.
You got a timer. You're about out of luck.
Yeah, but anyways, that any of the data you can actually kind of put in there is something that it actually can render, and it'll actually kind of keep on rendering and stuff like that. And some of the things is that it can also kind of do it a little bit dynamically. Another thing that you can also have is bar charts. So you can actually kind of render some bar charts. You can kind of label the bar charts, get a little bit of information for there. That's kind of how you actually kind of make a bar chart. This one, my apologies on this. This you can also create spark lines. It is there. The spark line is kind of there, but it's in hiding.
Okay.
But the thing is that you can actually create spark lines and actually have them kind of visualized as well as there. Let's see, kind of a quick overview of how you kind of make a program with this is that you, general workflow is you set up everything, you get your kind of like a GUI application, you get all your stuff set up, create your elements that you kind of want in there, put in some handlers, and then you go into a loop and profit. And some extra notes. Actually, while I was working on this presentation, the author actually kind of decided to do a major rewrite of the library. So there's actually two versions. There's a version 1 and a version 2. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the differences from there. So one of the things is that in the version 2, when he kind of updated it there, he actually made it a bit cleaner for actually how he did, I think, the event handlers and such as well. So if we kind of go back, this over here, this is actually kind of how you, when you create a handler, you just sort of kind of go through and kind of use like a syscontrol type interface, and you say, I want to actually get like, this character is actually something I want to actually respond to and do something when I hit that character, like quit, like this.
Okay.
Yep. So let's go back.
Tron or Meg or something?
It's probably quite possible. It's quite possible. The other thing I think also with the differences between the V1 and V2, there's also within the handlers as well that were kind of shown back over here. There's another one where he actually just hooks something up for basically saying I want basically my timer and like every sort of interval I'm supposed to kind of work through there. But unfortunately right now it only works on seconds. So that's actually kind of one thing I think with the V2 that's still kind of a work in progress. The V1 actually will support different sort of timers. So if you actually have something that requires different types of timings, that the V1 is actually kind of something that you would kind of want to work with.
That kind of works like a JavaScript set interval or something like that. On an interval, it runs a function or something to that effect. Exactly. For the V2 one, for V1 is actually it's kind of different. In fact, that you'd actually just put it inside of like basically a for loop, and then kind of set your timers from there. So you actually have a lot more control over the time, but you have to control that. All right. That's about it, actually, for all I had.
It's just sort of a quick kind of intro. Like I said, I kind of wrote a quick proof of concept display, so just to kind of show what it can do. Let's see, I guess we can take a look at this stuff, but I want to warn you, it's a proof of concept, so what you're going to see will probably horrify a lot of people. Okay. All right, so in here is actually sort of just...
The colors are horrific.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Reading the.
A little bigger?
Sure.
Visually,
I don't count that font in the
Is
group.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All
That
right.
is improvement.
All right. All right.
Oh no. What happened?
No, wait. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Okay. All right. So in general, let's see. Well, I'll actually kind of go through this one here a little bit. Here. This is another interface that I kind of skipped over in the demonstration. It's actually called a gauge, but it was the thing that you saw at the bottom where it sort of gives you basically it's a progress bar. And one of the things that you can do when you do that is you set up the gauge, you tell how far you've made it. You can also kind of set basically kind of different parameters for like a GUI widget, give it a label. You can also, inside the gauge itself, kind of say, hey, what is this gauge actually sort of telling you about or measuring or keeping progress of? You can do some alignments, some colors, which are kind of doing great right now.
So when you have to, if you want to update its percentage from 1 to 10%, can you just change it, or you have to change it and call render again?
Oh, so if you change it, then that actually, yeah, you do need to call render again. So that's actually something. Well, let me go down over
So it
here.
looks like a graphics library. So
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Change state, then you render.
Pretty much. Yes, exactly. So.
Do like a new tip tuning Go routines or something to go on it. Okay, so in Java you have the event dispatch thread.
Mhm.
Do you have to do anything like that, or do you just everything is on the same thread?
That's up to you for you to kind of decide if you want to keep it all in kind of like the one thread there, especially if you have some sort of stuff like you were asking about it. If this data is actually kind of a static data or something that's coming from there, that might be something you might want to actually kind of have that run in a Go routine to basically kind of dispatch and get some extra information kind of go through there. But it really depends on kind of like how you want to kind of work with it.
It looks like from your stack dump earlier, though, that under the hood it's using Go routines. 'Cause notice
Yeah,
there's
it
a
was.
bunch of-
Yeah.
Yes, yes. It's,
Like casting.
yeah, it's definitely behind the scenes using Go routines
Yeah.
for a lot of the timing.
Pretty cool.
So these are actually some of the other widgets here. This one was the text box, the lists. So you can see here, like I said, it's just a list of elements. That's kind of put in there. Let's see. For the line chart, this is actually kind of what was kind of being rendered here. This is actually the data it's coming from for here function coming from somewhere else.
In-DOS for doing this kind of thing.
Yeah,
It was a nightmare.
yeah.
Let's see. Let's go back to, you were asking about, don't mind that, that's something really nasty. But yeah, it's, like I said, it's a proof of concept, so my apologies.
I love the idea of doing the slides.
Yeah, that was brilliant, by the way.
That's awesome.
This keyboard. Okay, so is this is this normalized for cross-platform? In other words, that sys keyboard right, is that going to work across Windows, Mac, Linux?
As far as I know, yes.
It just figures out what it really means. Because
Yes.
on Windows, that's not what it is at all.
No, yes. So this is actually part of the thing with, I think, with the library. It abstracts away basically trying to figure out if basically this is, which particular character code that you're pressing on the keyboard. Rather, you say I want the right one, or I want the right arrow on the keyboard here. or spacebar or something like that. But to get back to your question, let's see, where did it go? Your percent here, or the percentage for the gauge you're getting to, you can just basically update it with by setting it here. There is a, and then over here, after which I call here draw to basically sort of just kind of say, I really want to explicitly update this, but there's also something else in the background that is going on at a regular interval to basically make sure that the updates are actually running on. Yeah, so just as a, I'm gonna try something, this is probably gonna fail, along with all the other stuff, but we wanna make sure, I just wanna see if it actually works on Linux as you're asking about.
Okay. Do it. Actually, what I find amusing is that a lot of these things work really well in Linux or Windows or both, but not a Mac. Or they work in a Mac and nothing else.
No.
No one sits down and goes, let me make this work in all. Yeah.
Right.
So you're just firing up a vagrant real quick.
Yeah, I'm just firing up a vagrant rope, so it's kind of getting itself there. In the meantime, let me see. I could try another sort of quick demo that I had kind of wrote is something like this here. Hopefully you can see anything. Okay, so this is just sort of a rendered visualization running on a text. This is actually running on a Mac, by the way.
Is this like a stock ticker or a news feed or?
Yeah, it's actually kind of like a news feed, kind of giving sort of updates for URLs regarding a particular sort of event that happened a little bit of a time ago. So.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll just play it again just so. Wow.
So the next client that calls me, they're going to go, I want a web app. I'm going to say, let's talk about a terminal app.
Well, that was I think that was part of the.
It's something new for you.
Links. Yeah.
Do it in link.
I jest, but I've already thought of, I got uses for this. This is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've already been able to see. Oh, great! Looks like you're ready.
Spirit of retro we were talking about.
I like to build a lot of command line tools for all.
Oh, yeah.
Command certain things.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Command line.
They should make another Steve Jobs movie with this kind of stuff when he's young,
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, is this one of those things where you type with black font color on a black background to see how hacker league you are?
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't even see what I'm typing. Yes, with no letters on it.
I use a blank keyboard
Do you really?
exclusively.
Yes.
Wow.
In Dvorak.
Wow, that's awesome.
I'm not worried. I consider myself fairly good, but that's impressive, sir.
That's pretty awesome. Okay.
And those guys in Austin, I try to think of the company put that out. They were a spinoff of Slumber
Let's
Kings.
see.
They had some kind of Perl content management system. I can't remember the name of them. On the side of the keyboard, that's where they made more money than they did on their CMS.
Funny.
This developer keyboard with the blank.
I believe it. It's funny.
After a while, Slumber Kings was trying to spin off incubators.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Jumping in the bandwagon, and that was one of the ones they incubated.
Now, I think what would make you super elite would be a keyboard with no letters on it that happens to be made of, it's laser projected. So the laser projected keyboard is that no
There's no
letters.
tactile interface. Like,
Exactly. So you literally have just square.
I've tried it.
You gotta figure it out.
I sometimes come over to his desk, and I just want to be like, sometimes like, okay,
that
please type
helps.
for a second. I'm like,
Jeez.
He
Okay.
does that for
Have you seen this? Microsoft
VS Code?
Yeah.
Yeah, where you can go up and down. Those where your fingers going.
So you can put in the debug.
Let me see if this works.
I did try this on the Mac. Very light.
Okay.
I couldn't get it to work.
Is it working?
It's working, but it's I guess the colors are actually kind of displaying. Yeah, my apologies. It is working. Well, here, if you want, you can play with it. Here's the roof. sorry. Okay.
Yours isn't purple?
No, it's not.
Well, what happened to the projector?
No,
So I'm not sure. No. As far as I know, I am peculiar about my color scheme, but not that peculiar.